Let's help him ring in the new year. Light him up, Mason. Go, go, go!
To you, the viewer, this is probably a standard moment you've seen and played in dozens of shooters over the years. But for me, this moment was revolutionary. Not because of what's happening on screen, but because of what I was feeling in my hands, thanks to the PlayStation 5's new DualSense controller. New consoles tend to set the standard of gaming for the next 5 to 7 years. Better graphics, new interfaces, and yes, new controllers. Xbox's new controller is largely the same with some new ergonomic designs, but Sony's really been hyping up its new DualSense controller with haptic feedback and adaptive triggers. Something at first I thought would be another gimmick, like the 6-axis or touchpad. But after spending a few weeks with the thing, it has become my favorite part of the PS5. Rather than demand you play your games in a new, more awkward way, haptic feedback and the adaptive triggers enhance the way we already play games. And funny enough, it wasn't Astro's Playroom, the free game that acts as a demo for the DualSense, that sold me on it. It was this year's Call of Duty of all things, because these features are perfect for shooters. Haptic feedback is an evolution of the standard rumble we've all been using for the past few decades. Previous controllers like the DualShock 4 use motors that create nice but binary experiences for rumble. It shakes when it's supposed to and stops when it needs to stop. With haptic feedback, it uses voice coil actuators, which is the same kind of tech that's used to vibrate speakers, and as a result, developers have more control over how the rumble operates. In the case of Call of Duty, when I fire this MP5, the DualSense vibrates to the specific rhythm of the fire rate, and when you swap to a burst fire weapon, that rhythm changes. The same effect applies to reloading. Feeling the controller as you load each shell is subtle, but adds a lot to the experience. It's the kind of improvement that's hard to fully express, but you feel the difference right away in your hand. Meanwhile, there's the adaptive triggers, which takes the idea of pressure-sensitive buttons that the PS2 had, but this time the controller changes that pressure based on the current situation of the game. Triggers now have a resistance to them, not unlike an actual gun, and that resistance changes based on the weapon. Pistols can be tapped with your finger much more quickly, while a single-shot rifle requires more effort to fire. It makes every shot feel more impactful, and there's a real tangible difference to using each gun. Even pulling the left trigger to aim down sights uses the adaptive triggers. Pulling out a machine gun requires a lot more pressure and tricks your brain into getting the impression that this gun is a heavy beast. And when you couple all that with the haptic feedback and a nice pair of headphones, I have never felt more immersed shooting a gun with a standard video game controller. I had a blast playing through Cold War's campaign, and the DualSense is a major reason why. Out of curiosity, I switched over to the PS4 version of the game, and it's so hard to go back. The old DualShock, it's fine, it served me well for the last 7 years, but the DualSense makes it feel like a relic. Of course, the option to turn all these off is possible on both a game and system level if you're the kind of person that can't stand rumble, or you have a disability that prevents you from using it. In fact, I can see a lot of hardcore competitive players turning the triggers in particular off in multiplayer. You can't really feather the trigger like you're used to with the adaptives turned on, and it's easier to snap to players without the pressure. I won't deny, it did feel like I was performing slightly better without them, leaving me in a situation where I was choosing between performance or immersion. But that could simply be because that's what I'm used to, and as I become more accustomed to the DualSense, that feeling will go away. I predict a lot of debate around this in PvP communities in the coming months. But for me, as somebody who primarily enjoys single-player experiences, I'm in love with the DualSense, and what's most exciting is that this is just the first attempt. As more developers get their hands on this, the implementation will only improve. You hear examples from developers like the upcoming Deathloop who talk about how the triggers will lock up when the gun jams, and my mind races with the possibilities. Just imagine what a developer like Hideo Kojima can do with this. But that does bring up the concern that devs do need to put in the time to properly implement it. Call of Duty has a deal with Sony that pushes the marketing for the game on the PlayStation, so it makes sense that they went all out with it. Meanwhile, Assassin's Creed Valhalla was marketed for the Xbox, and it doesn't do anything special with the haptic feedback and doesn't even use the adaptive triggers at all. Spending extra time and money on features that will only apply to one system might not always be possible, but I am hopeful that this won't go the same route as 6-axis did back on the PS3. It's a far more subtle and useful feature that can be applied to games without needing to be built around it. At the very least, I think I'm going to be buying shooters on the PS5 for the foreseeable future.